In this video, we'll introduce primitive geometry, how to install and apply a preset, and how to make lots of clones of an object using a replicator. So just like before, let's open our last scene and save it to our Video 5 folder and increase the increment. In this video, I want to create a simple new background, a kitchen counter, that emphasizes that this is a product for people to use in their own homes. In order to create that background, we need to first disable the cyclorama wall that the scene started with. So let's toggle the eye icon here to do that. Now we need to make some new geometry. Geometry is what 3D scenes are made up from. This is the edges, polygons, and vertices. But there's no need to have a deep understanding of how polygons work. Just understanding that polygons create the surfaces that materials are applied to is enough for what we're doing. We need to make a new mesh item layer to contain the geometry we'll be creating for the countertop. To create a new empty mesh layer to model in, we'll use the Add Item button in the items list. Click the button to open the menu, then double-click the mesh icon to create the item layer. It will be selected by default, saving us a click. First order of business is to rename it to countertop. So click to inline rename and type in countertop. Now we will be working in a component of an item, adding in polygons. So let's switch into the polygon selection mode in order to do that. Our countertop will basically be a flattened cube, so we're going to create it with some of the primitive tools. The primitive tools create geometry for us automatically based on simple geometric shapes. Because of their simple nature, they're referred to as primitives, but don't be fooled by the name. They are exceedingly useful. The primitive tools are found in the modeling toolbox under Basic. These tools right here represent all the various primitives offered in Modo. For our box, we need only to click this button to activate the tool. Once the tool is activated, you next need to click and drag somewhere in the 3D viewport to make the tool interactive. This allows us to drag out the edges and make adjustments using these tool handles. Just like the transform tools, these handles will change to a yellow color when you hover over them, allowing you to adjust the primitive in specific ways. For this tutorial, I want specific results. The interactive drawing is just a little too imprecise for this, so we can enter values in the tool's properties panel found under the toolbox whenever a tool is active. These are all the settings you can adjust for the cube primitive. Let's set our center for the cube at 0, -30mm, and 0. When entering information like this, press the Tab key to jump between input fields and finalize a value by pressing Enter. Now let's set the size at 1.976 by 60mm by 760mm. Just to note, all measurements are in metric, with meter being the default value. I also want to set segments. This is the number of polygon divisions along our surface to 26 on the X and 10 on the Z. Pressing Tab between each value to jump between the input boxes and Enter in the last one to accept the values. We can see the values update the cube displayed in the viewport as we work. We're done now, so we can press the Q key to drop the tool and keep our values. Let's double click on the resulting surface and give it a material. Press M and let's call this one Marble Counter. Now we need to make the backsplash, which just needs to be an upright flat plane. So let's create another new mesh layer and click to activate the cube tool again. And we'll draw another shape here. Keep in mind you can still navigate the view while any tool is active, so if you ever need to change your position or rotation, you can. The backsplash needs to be 1.976 wide by 760mm on the Y. And we need the segments to be 52 across and 20 high. Press Enter to accept the values and Q to drop the tool and make the polyplane. Now I wasn't very accurate on where I drew this plane, so I need to move it into position relative to the counter. We can do this accurately using snapping. I want to move the plane but have it snap to a different component type, the vertex. These represent the corners of any polygon. I want to move the entire plane, so let's double click on it to select all of its vertices. This tells Modo what we want to affect. Now we enable snapping using this button above the viewport. When it is orange like this, snapping is enabled and will cause nearby objects to jump into accurate position based on its settings. So let's press the shortcut for the Move tool, W, and click here on this corner vertex and drag it over to the back corner of the counter. See how it snaps and aligns itself with that counter? Once it's in place, press the Q tool to drop the move, and go ahead and disable snapping, and let's give our backsplash a material too. Making sure we're in polygons mode again, double click the surface to select all the polygons and press M. Let's give it a name. How about tile grout, since this is what it's going to end up being. Press OK. All our geometry is now in place, so let's save our scene pressing Ctrl S. In order to apply the surfacing to this new geometry we've created, we're going to turn to another great resource for scene building, and that is presets. Presets are collected settings of layers and items that serve many purposes in Modo. We are going to be using material presets, predefined materials to complete our counter. Presets can contain any number of images and texture layers, are a quick way to get fantastic results with very little effort. When you downloaded Modo, there was an associated content package. This is downloaded and installed separately from Modo. This is where the included presets reside. You can also download hundreds of presets from the community share site, and there are websites on the internet that sell collections of presets as well. The ones we need for this tutorial have been included in the content of these videos. Open a file browser for your OS and navigate to the folder where the content is located, as defined in the first video of this series. Open the Video 5 folder, and in there is a file called Modo Basics Presets LPK. Drag and drop this file directly onto the Modo window to install them. If all goes correctly, you should get a pop-up letting you know the content is now installed. If you don't get that confirmation pop-up, it's recommended that you download at least one of the content installers and make sure it's installed correctly, and then return to this part of the training. With the presets installed correctly, let's continue. To view the presets that come with Modo, press the F6 key. This keyboard shortcut opens up the preset browser. This is where we can see all the presets that are currently installed. Any of the items in here can be used in your scene. The ones we just installed are here under Materials, Modo Basics. Let's switch to our shader tree tab over here and make sure we can see our two new materials, the countertop and the tile grout. To use a material preset, I prefer to drag and drop the presets directly into the shader tree. Let's give it a try. Click on the marble counter preset icon and drag it into the shader tree right under our group item and release the mouse button. This adds in that shading information to the surface. Let's press F8 for a preview and see if it worked. Looks like we did it right. So now let's do the same thing for the backboard and drag the tile grout preset under the grout material group. That looks pretty good. I think we are now on the home stretch of our scene. The last thing we need to do is the actual tiles. This will be the most complex part of the entire tutorial, but it'll hopefully also be the most rewarding. We are going to model a small single tile using the cube primitive, and then clone that numerous times over the backboard to make it look like a realistic tiled surface, as in kitchen tile. Let's close our preset window and preview and disable all the items in our items list too, so this way we don't have any distractions in our scene. The keyboard shortcut to create a new empty mesh layer to put our tile in is done by pressing N. We can right away activate the cube primitive tool by clicking on it and drawing out a small square. We want the actual size to be 35mm by 8mm by 35mm. So let's enter those values we want, and we want 4 subdivisions as well on the width and length, but only 1 for its thickness. Press Enter to accept these values and press Q to drop the tool. When we are using a replicator to clone our objects, its location relative to the origin of our scene is very important, so we need to make sure that the object we've created is positioned at the very center of our universe. This is the 0, 0, 0 location. An easy way to center any geometry we've created is to use the center command. Let's double-click our tiny box to select all of its polygons. This is what we're going to be affecting. Now in the toolbox, click the Center Selected, which opens up a contextual menu, and then choose All. That centers our cube right at the origin. In order to zoom right up to anything that's selected in the viewport, use the View command Fit Selected. Let's first make a couple modifications to our tile. One thing I'm always trying to do is optimize my scenes, reducing polygon counts where possible. For things that will never be seen, it's okay to remove the polygons. This reduces the amount of memory needed to render a scene. So let's rotate to the underside of the tile and select all the faces pointing downward by clicking and dragging the mouse over them. With the target polygons highlighted, press the Delete key on your keyboard, removing them from the object. Next, I want to round out the corners so it looks more like an actual tile, and this can be done automatically using a technique called subdivision surfaces. With subdivision surfaces, Modo will divide the polygon at render time, applying a smoothing algorithm to each division. The beauty of the technique is that it's only applied at render time, so you can go back and modify your base geometry called the cage at any time without having to deal with all of those polygons created by dividing it. This is the fundamental way nearly all models are created today. To activate Subdivision Surfaces mode, we select the target polygons and press the Tab key. See now how they are nice and smooth? Since we have our polygons selected, let's apply a material too. Press M and name our surface Stone Tile. That's it for the first tile, but our tiles have multiple colors, so let's press Ctrl C to copy it to the clipboard, same as you would for text in a word processor. Press N to create another new mesh item, and press Ctrl V to paste those polygons into the new layer. We can disable the first tile to get it out of our way. Let's apply a new material to this tile. Another important concept to understand in Modo is the idea of implicit selections. On any given item layer, when nothing is selected, this actually means everything is selected, and as such, it means the selection is implied. So since the tile is the only thing in this layer, we don't actually need to explicitly select the polygons at all. We can just press M and everything in the target layer will be tagged with that material. So let's press M and we'll call this one Glass Tile and enter. Now would also be a good time to name our newly created mesh items. I'll name this one Stone Tile. And Glass Tile for the second one. Okay, that gives us our first 2 tiles, but I actually want there to be 4 tiles randomly distributed. So let's clone the glass tile 2 more times as instances. Right-click on the glass tile in the items list and select Instance. Okay, now let's do that a second time. That gives us 4 items in the items list. So let's group them together like items by selecting them again. Click on the top layer and then hold down the Control key and click our other layers. Now press Control G. And let's name this folder Tiles. We're ready now for our last step, cloning the tiles onto the backboard. This is done procedurally using a replicator. Procedural describes something that is done using a set of rules. The replicator does just that. It replicates or clones your object and changes the clones using rules that you defined. Replicators are created in the items list using the Add Item option. If we click the button, we can type in the first couple characters of the name and then double-click the replicator item that comes up, adding it to our scene. Let's get a clear view of our property panels now and look at the instancing section of the window. These are the main settings we use to define what is cloned and how. The prototype object means this is the source object, or the geometry that's going to get cloned. The point source is where the geometry gets cloned to, or in our case, on. The source mode defines in what way the point source is considered. Let's define our tiles as the prototype, or tile, and the backboard as the point source. The source mode is going to be set as use polygons. This will place a clone exactly in the center of every polygon on our object. This is the reason for the high number of subdivisions we created on our surface earlier. We need to turn on our items again in order to see what's going on here, so toggle all of our item layers except for the cyc wall. And let's open Preview to take a look. That's pretty interesting, but we still haven't added the surfacing to the tiles. They're all the same. So let's apply the last two material presets onto our stone tile and glass tile materials that we created earlier. Press F6 to open the preset browser and drag and drop the presets just like before into their associated materials. See, Preview updates, but our tiles are still all the same. This is because we can only specify a single item in the prototype input. In order to collect multiples together, we need to make an actual group item. This is a separate object different from groups in the items list. Before we create it, I like to press the escape key a few times just to make sure we don't have anything unnecessary selected. Then in the items list, make sure we only select the 4 tiles we just made. Now we need to switch to the actual Groups tab. It's here next to the shader tree. In here, press the New Group option and we'll type in All Tiles for its name. This is just a standard group we're making, so let's keep the settings at their default values and just press OK. So now we have created a group item that contains the 4 meshes that we can see right here. So jumping back to the replicator, we specify the group that we just made as the prototype. Open that up, and there it is. When we do this, the replicator will randomly grab one of the items in the group for each position when cloning the objects. We should now see Preview is updated accordingly. We can add in a slight little amount of randomness too using the variation settings. Let's set the random twist to 1 degree for each setting. Each tile now will randomly rotate on any axis between 0 and 1 degree, making the tiles look a little bit more man-made and natural. And there you have it, our coffee scene is now complete. Sit back and bask in the glory of all that we have just created. In this video, we have learned how to use the primitive tools to create basic geometry, we learned how to install and apply preset materials, and we also learned how to create a replicator and clone objects over the surface of another. That pretty much wraps up this series of Getting Started with Modo. I hope you can see now how easy it is to get amazing results right away without needing to be an expert in the software. I also hope this video has given you a solid foundation for how Modo operates, so you can better follow along with other tutorials online. This is really just the tip of the iceberg of what Modo is really capable of. Thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing your continued exploration on our community forum, a great place to share and learn. I hope that you will join us.